It's the ultimate Hollywood paradox. A beloved on-screen hero who was a real-life villain. The Golden Age was packed with stars whose off-screen reputations were the stuff of nightmares. Today, we're exposing the most hated actors who made life miserable for everyone around them, proving that a golden statue doesn't make you a golden person. 1. Mary Pickford. On screen, Mary Pickford was the face of silent film, America's sweetheart, the girl with the golden curls. She was one of the most powerful and beloved women in the world, a co-founder of the United Artists Studio, alongside Charlie Chaplin and D.W. Griffith. She projected an image of innocence and charm that made audiences adore her. But behind the scenes, she was a shrewd, ruthless businesswoman with a reputation for being incredibly difficult and controlling. You won't believe what came next. As a producer and studio head, she was notoriously tough in contract negotiations, earning a reputation as a penny pincher who would fight tooth and nail over every dollar. She wielded her immense power with an iron fist, and many in the industry found her to be cold, calculating, and impossible to please. Her marriage to fellow superstar Douglas Fairbanks was a Hollywood fairy tale for the public, but privately, it was a tumultuous and often unhappy union. As the silent era ended and talkies took over, Pickford struggled to adapt. Her sweet, innocent persona didn't translate well to sound, and her career began to fade. She became increasingly reclusive and developed a serious drinking problem. A sad end for a woman who had once been the most powerful star in the world. Mary Pickford's sweet image hid a will of iron. But our next star was a leading man whose handsome face masked a notoriously cold and difficult personality. 2. Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power was one of the great romantic leading men of the 30s and 40s. He was impossibly handsome, with a dashing screen presence that made him a box office giant. He starred in swashbuckling adventures, romantic dramas, and epic war films. To the public, he was the epitome of grace and charm. But on set, he was known for being distant, aloof, and intensely private. A stark contrast to his warm on-screen persona. The wild part is, his reputation for being difficult often stemmed from his own insecurities. He was desperate to be taken seriously as an actor, and hated being typecast as just a handsome face. This led him to be demanding and often unhappy on set, clashing with directors and producers over the quality of his roles. His personal life was also a source of controversy. His marriage to actress Annabella ended in a messy and public divorce, and his numerous affairs were the talk of the town. But the most scandalous part of his story was his untimely death. In 1958, while filming a dueling scene for the movie Solomon and Sheba, he suffered a massive heart attack on set and died at the age of 44. It was a shocking and tragic end for one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Tyrone Power's good looks masked a troubled soul, but our next star was a comedic genius whose off-screen life was filled with scandal and tragedy. 3. Fatty Arbuckle. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was one of the biggest comedy stars of the silent era, a contemporary of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. He was a gifted physical comedian, known for his incredible agility despite his large size. He was one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood, a beloved star at the peak of his powers. And then everything flips upside down. In 1921, Arbuckle was at the center of one of the first and most sensational scandals in Hollywood history. After a wild party at a San Francisco hotel, a young actress named Virginia Rappe fell ill and died a few days later. Arbuckle was accused of her intimate violence and manslaughter. The story became a media circus, with newspapers printing lurid and often fabricated details about the party. Arbuckle went through 3 highly publicized trials. In the 3rd trial, he was finally acquitted, and the jury even issued a formal apology to him. But the damage was done. His films were banned, and he was publicly blacklisted from the industry. his career was completely destroyed. Though he would later work as a director under a pseudonym, he never acted in front of a camera again. He died of a heart attack at the age of 46, a broken man whose name became synonymous with Hollywood scandal. Fatty Arbuckle's career was destroyed by scandal, but our next star was a musical icon whose diva-like behavior was legendary. 4. Judy Garland. Judy Garland was, without a doubt, one of the most talented performers in the history of show business. Her iconic role as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz and her legendary concert performances made her a global superstar. She had a voice that could break your heart and a vulnerability that made audiences love her. But behind the curtain, Garland's life was a chaotic and often tragic mess of addiction, insecurity, and notoriously difficult on-set behavior. From the outside, it seemed simple until you dig deeper. From a young age, she was plied with amphetamines and sleeping pills by the studio to keep up with the grueling demands of filmmaking. This led to a lifelong battle with addiction that made her unreliable and often impossible to work with. She was frequently late to set, would lock herself in her dressing room for hours, and would clash with directors and co-stars. She was fired from the film Annie Get Your Gun for her erratic behavior, and developed a reputation as being unemployable. Her personal life was equally tumultuous, with 5 marriages and constant financial struggles. It was a heartbreaking spiral for a woman who brought so much joy to so many. Her story is a cautionary tale of the dark side of the studio system and the immense pressure placed on its brightest stars. Judy Garland's talent was matched only by her turmoil. But our next star was a handsome leading man, whose arrogance was the stuff of legend. 5. Errol Flynn. On screen, Errol Flynn was the ultimate swashbuckling hero. As Robin Hood, Captain Blood, and Don Juan, he was the dashing, athletic, and impossibly charming adventurer that every man wanted to be and every woman wanted to be with. But off-screen, he was a notorious womanizer, a hard-partying hellraiser, and one of the most scandalous figures in Hollywood history. His motto was, "I intend to live the first half of my life. I don't care about the second half." And he meant it. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. His on-set behavior was often unprofessional. He would show up late, drunk, and unprepared, much to the frustration of his co-stars and directors. His feud with actress Olivia de Havilland was legendary. He loved playing practical jokes on her, some of which were cruel and mean-spirited. His partying was the stuff of legend, with his home on Mulholland Drive becoming a notorious den of debauchery. In 1942, he was put on trial for statutory intimate attack, a massive scandal that threatened to end his career. He was acquitted, but his reputation as a wicked, wicked man was sealed. He was a man who lived his life with a reckless abandon that was both thrilling and deeply self-destructive. Errol Flynn was a legendary hellraiser, but our next star was a comedic genius whose misanthropy and alcoholism made him notoriously difficult to work with. 6. W.C. Fields. W.C. Fields was one of the great, iconic comedians of the early sound era. With his signature top hat, his bulbous red nose, and his mumbling misanthropic delivery, he created a unique comedic persona, a hard-drinking, child-hating, and perpetually put-upon grump. He was a brilliant writer and performer, a master of verbal comedy and slapstick, but the character he played on screen wasn't much of an act. In real life, Fields was a notorious curmudgeon and a legendary alcoholic. It was supposed to be easy until it wasn't. He famously kept a thermos of gin, which he referred to as his lemonade, with him at all times. He would often ad-lib his lines, much to the frustration of his fellow actors, and he openly despised working with children. His most famous quote on the subject was, "Anyone who hates children and dogs can't be all bad." He was known for being rude, cantankerous, and generally unpleasant to be around. But his genius was undeniable. He created a string of comedy classics, and his unique brand of cynical, misanthropic humor has influenced generations of comedians. He was a man who turned his own grumpy, alcohol-fueled personality into a legendary comedic art form. W.C. Fields was a legendary grump, but our next star was a screen siren whose ego and diva demands were even bigger than her on-screen persona. 7. Mae West. Mae West was a force of nature. She was a writer, a producer, and a star who controlled her own career with an iron fist at a time when Hollywood was completely dominated by men. She was a brilliant comedian, famous for her hot, confident, and endlessly quotable one-liners. Like, "When I'm good, I'm very good, but when I'm bad, I'm better." She was a trailblazer, a feminist icon who shattered conventions and challenged the censors with her bawdy, intimate, liberated persona. She was also, by all accounts, a massive pain to work with. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. West was a notorious perfectionist who demanded complete creative control over her films. She wrote her own dialogue and would often rewrite scenes on the spot, much to the frustration of her directors. She was also famously vain, insisting on specific lighting and camera angles to make her look her best. She would often clash with her co-stars, particularly the young Cary Grant, whom she discovered and then proceeded to torment on the set of She Done Him Wrong. She saw other actresses as competition and was known for being cold and dismissive to them. She was a true diva, a woman who knew her own star power and wasn't afraid to use it to get exactly what she wanted. Mae West was a pioneering diva, but our next star was a handsome actor whose alleged connections to the mob cast a dark shadow over his career. 8. George Raft. George Raft was the epitome of the smooth, tough guy gangster in 30s and 40s cinema. With his slick-back hair, his pinstripe suits, and his cool, menacing demeanor, he was one of Hollywood's biggest stars. He was a former boxer and a professional dancer, and he brought a real sense of street-smart authenticity to his roles. Raft grew up in a tough New York neighborhood and was famously friends with several real-life gangsters, including Bugsy Siegel. And then came the part nobody expected. His alleged connections to the mob became a major part of his public persona and a source of constant scandal. He was often seen in public with known criminals, and rumors swirled that his career was being backed by organized crime. This reputation both helped and hindered him. It gave him an aura of dangerous authenticity, but it also made him a pariah in some Hollywood circles. He was also notoriously difficult on set, turning down some of the most iconic roles in movie history, including the leads in The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca, because he didn't want to work with certain directors, or because the roles weren't tough enough. His poor career choices and his scandalous reputation eventually led to a long, slow decline. George Raft's tough guy act was no act, but our next star was a brilliant actor whose intense, brooding nature made him a nightmare for his co-star. 9. Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando changed acting forever. His raw, naturalistic style in films like A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront was a revolution, a complete break from the more theatrical acting of the past. He was a genius, a true artist who was widely considered to be the greatest actor of his generation. He was also, by all accounts, an absolute nightmare to work with. As his fame grew, his behavior on set became increasingly erratic and unprofessional. Just when it all seemed figured out, he became known for his bizarre demands and his open contempt for the filmmaking process. He would often refuse to learn his lines, forcing producers to write them on cue cards and hide them around the set. He would argue with directors, rewrite scenes, and generally cause chaos. During the filming of Mutiny on the Bounty, his diva-like behavior and his clashes with the cast and crew were so extreme that they nearly sank the entire production. He became overweight and reclusive, often taking roles purely for the massive paychecks. His later career was a strange mix of brilliant performances and lazy, phoned-in appearances. He was a true paradox, a revolutionary artist who seemed to hate the very art form he had revolutionized. Brando was a tortured genius, but our next star was a comedic icon whose massive ego and controlling nature made him a tyrant on set. 10. Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was a global icon, the most famous man in the world. As the Little Tramp, he created a character that was beloved by audiences everywhere. He was a brilliant filmmaker, a master of comedy and pathos who controlled every aspect of his productions. From writing and directing to composing the music, he was a true cinematic genius. He was also a notorious perfectionist and a complete tyrant on set. At first it looked harmless, but his quest for perfection often manifested as a cruel and obsessive need for control. He would demand hundreds of takes for a single scene, mentally and physically exhausting his actors. He was known for being cold, dismissive, and often verbally abusive to his co-stars, particularly the women in his films. He would act out every part for them, essentially turning them into puppets who were just mimicking his performance. His personal life was also a constant source of scandal. He had a penchant for marrying very young women, which led to a series of messy and public divorces. In the 1940s, he was the subject of a paternity suit that became a media circus. His left-leaning political views also made him a target during the McCarthy era, and he was eventually exiled from the United States for over 20 years. He was a complex and contradictory figure, a beloved entertainer who was often a monster to the people around him. Charlie Chaplin was a comedic tyrant, but our next star was a leading man, whose on-set pranks were often just plain cruel. 11. Clark Gable. He was the king of Hollywood. For over 2 decades, Clark Gable was the biggest movie star in the world. With his rugged good looks, his charismatic smile, and his undeniable masculine charm, he was the epitome of the classic Hollywood leading man. He was the star of some of the most iconic films ever made, including It Happened One Night and, of course, Gone with the Wind. To the public, he was a beloved and respected icon. But what people miss is this key detail. On set, Gable was a notorious prankster, and his jokes were often mean-spirited and unprofessional. He loved to play cruel jokes on his co-stars, particularly the women. During the filming of Red Dust, he famously put a live snake in Jean Harlow's dressing room. He was also known for his bad breath, a problem he reportedly refused to address, much to the dismay of his leading ladies. His most infamous on-set behavior came during the filming of The Misfits, where he clashed with his co-star, Marilyn Monroe. He was openly contemptuous of her chronic lateness and her struggles with addiction, and their on-set relationship was notoriously toxic. Gable was a man's man from an era where that often meant being a bully. Clark Gable was a prank-loving bully, but our next star was a screen legend whose battles with the studio system were the stuff of Hollywood lore. 12. Bette Davis. Bette Davis was a force of nature. With her distinctive voice, her intense, smoldering eyes, and her powerful dramatic performances, she was one of the greatest actresses of the Golden Age. She was a 2-time Academy Award winner, a true artist who fought for complex and challenging roles at a time when most actresses were relegated to playing love interests. She was also, famously, legendarily difficult. It was supposed to be easy until it wasn't. Davis was a warrior who was constantly at war with her studio, Warner Brothers. She hated the mediocre script she was given and would often go on suspension rather than appear in a film she thought was beneath her. She even took the studio to court in a landmark case, trying to get out of her contract. She lost, but the case set a precedent and helped to eventually dismantle the old studio system. On set, she was known for being demanding, aggressive, and often combative with her directors and co-stars. Her infamous, lifelong feud with fellow actress Joan Crawford was the stuff of Hollywood legend, a bitter rivalry that was recently immortalized in the TV series Feud. Davis was a true original, a brilliant and uncompromising artist who refused to play by the rules. Bette Davis was a legendary fighter, but our next star was a crooner whose connections to the mob were an open secret in Hollywood. 13. Frank Sinatra. He was the voice, Old Blue Eyes, the chairman of the board. Frank Sinatra was more than just a singer and an actor. He was a cultural icon. He was one of the most popular entertainers of the 20th century, a charismatic performer who could do it all. He won an Oscar for his role in From Here to Eternity and starred in a string of classic films. He was the leader of the infamous Rat Pack, a group of entertainers whose cool, swaggering style defined Las Vegas glamour. He was also a man with a notoriously short temper and well-documented ties to organized crime. The wild part is, his connections to the mob were an open secret. He was friends with some of the most powerful and dangerous gangsters in the country, including Sam Giancana and Lucky Luciano. These connections reportedly helped him get out of his early recording contract and may have even helped him land his Oscar-winning role. He was known for his volatile temper, his entourage of tough guys, and his often bullying behavior towards journalists and anyone who crossed him. His personal life was a mess of high-profile affairs and tumultuous marriages, most notably to the fiery actress Ava Gardner. He was a man who lived by his own set of rules, a beloved entertainer with a very dark and dangerous side. Sinatra had a dangerous side, but our next star was a brilliant comedian whose tyrannical behavior on set was no laughing matter. 14. Milton Berle. He was Mr. Television, the first great star of the TV era. In the late 40s and early 50s, Milton Berle's show Texaco Star Theater was so popular that it was responsible for a massive spike in the sale of television sets across America. He was a pioneer, a vaudeville veteran who brought his old school, anything for a laugh style to the new medium. He was also, by all accounts, an absolute monster to work with. Here's where it all takes a sharp turn. Berle was a notorious egomaniac and a joke thief. He was famous for stealing material from other comedians and passing it off as his own. On the set of his show, he was a complete tyrant. He would verbally abuse his writers, his co-stars, and the crew. He was known for his massive ego, his need to be the center of attention at all times, and his often crude off-stage behavior. He would famously and intentionally ruin other actors' takes if he felt they were getting a bigger laugh than he was. He was a man who was so desperate for the spotlight that he would do anything to keep it, even if it meant alienating everyone around him. He was a true television pioneer, but he was also a deeply insecure and often unpleasant man. Milton Berle was a television tyrant, but our next star was a Hollywood queen whose obsessive, controlling behavior towards her children became the stuff of horror legend. 15. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was the epitome of Hollywood glamour. For over 4 decades, she was a major movie star, a survivor who constantly reinvented herself to stay on top. From her early days as a flapper in the silent era to her Oscar-winning comeback in Mildred Pierce, she was a true Hollywood legend. She was known for her dramatic intensity, her striking beauty, and her incredible work ethic. She was also, as the world would later find out, a deeply disturbed and abusive mother. And then everything flips upside down. Years after her death, her adopted daughter Christina published a bombshell memoir called Mommy Dearest. The book depicted Crawford as a cruel, obsessive, and terrifyingly abusive alcoholic. The most infamous scene, of course, involved Crawford flying into a rage over the use of wire coat hangers. The book was a massive bestseller and was later turned into a cult classic film starring Faye Dunaway. The revelations shattered Crawford's glamorous image and replaced it with that of a monstrous child abuser. While some have questioned the accuracy of the book, it completely and irrevocably changed the public's perception of Joan Crawford, turning her from a beloved movie star into a legendary Hollywood villain. Joan Crawford was a mommy dearest. But our next star was a comedic legend whose behind-the-scenes cruelty was legendary. 16. Jerry Lewis. As one half of the legendary comedy duo Martin and Lewis, and later as a solo star and director, Jerry Lewis was a comedy giant. His manic, childlike, slapstick persona made him one of the most popular entertainers in the world. He was a brilliant physical comedian, a gifted filmmaker, and a tireless humanitarian, famous for his annual telethons for muscular dystrophy. He was also known for being an arrogant, controlling, and deeply unpleasant man. Just when it all seemed figured out, his dark side became more and more public. His bitter, decades-long feud with his former partner Dean Martin was legendary. He was known for being a tyrant on set, a perfectionist who would scream at his cast and crew. He was notoriously dismissive of his fans and was often rude and condescending in interviews. In his later years, he became a bitter and angry old man, famous for his grumpy and often offensive public appearances. He was a true paradox, a man who made millions laugh, but who seemed to be deeply unhappy and angry himself. He was a comedy legend, whose off-screen personality was no laughing matter. Jerry Lewis was a comedy paradox, but our next star was a screen siren, whose on-set behavior was so bad it got her fired from a major film. 17. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was more than just a movie star. She was an icon. She was the ultimate blonde bombshell, a symbol of glamour, intimacy, and vulnerability. She was also a gifted comedic actress with a surprising amount of depth. But behind the iconic image was a deeply troubled and insecure woman whose on-set behavior became legendary for all the wrong reasons. The deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Monroe was notoriously difficult to work with. She was chronically late, sometimes showing up hours after she was called to set. She struggled to remember her lines, requiring dozens of takes for even the simplest scenes. She was heavily dependent on prescription substances and was often emotionally volatile, locking herself in her dressing room and refusing to come out. Her behavior drove her directors and co-stars crazy. Tony Curtis famously said that kissing her was like kissing Hitler. Her constant lateness and unprofessionalism during the filming of The Misfits reportedly contributed to Clark Gable's fatal heart attack shortly after filming Wrapped. Her behavior finally caught up to her on the set of the film Something's Got to Give, where her constant absences led to her being fired from the movie, a stunning move for such a huge star. Marilyn Monroe was a troubled icon, but our next star was a brilliant actor whose intense method acting often crossed the line into abusive behavior. 18. Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman is one of the greatest actors of his generation, a two-time Oscar winner known for his intense, immersive performances in films like The Graduate, Midnight Cowboy, and Kramer vs. Kramer. He is a master of his craft, a brilliant method actor who completely disappears into his roles. He is also known for being an incredibly difficult and often cruel person to work with. It all boils down to this one twist. His dedication to the method often led him to torment his co-stars in the name of getting a real performance out of them. During the filming of Kramer vs. Kramer, he famously and repeatedly slapped his co-star, Meryl Streep, across the face without her permission, a shocking act of on-set abuse that she has spoken about in recent years. He also reportedly taunted her about the recent death of her partner John Cazale to provoke an emotional reaction. On the set of Marathon Man, he reportedly stayed up for days to get into character, only to be famously asked by his co-star, Laurence Olivier, "My dear boy, why don't you just try acting?" In recent years, multiple women have come forward with allegations of intimate harassment against Hoffman, further cementing his reputation as a brilliant actor whose off-screen behavior was often monstrous. Dustin Hoffman's method was monstrous. But our next star was a comedic genius whose mean-spiritedness and cruelty were legendary. 19. Chevy Chase. In the late 70s and early 80s, Chevy Chase was the king of comedy. As the original breakout star of Saturday Night Live and the lead in classic comedy films like Caddyshack and National Lampoon's Vacation, he was one of the biggest stars in the world. His cool, sarcastic, and effortlessly charming persona made him a comedy icon. He was also, by all accounts, a complete and total jerk. The real shocker was still to come. His reputation for being arrogant, mean-spirited, and just plain cruel is legendary in Hollywood. He famously got into a fistfight with Bill Murray backstage at SNL. He was known for being verbally abusive to writers and crew members. He would often make cruel, personal jokes at the expense of his co-stars. His behavior on the set of the sitcom Community was so bad that it led to a public feud with the show's creator, Dan Harmon, and his eventual departure from the show. He is a man who has seemingly managed to alienate almost everyone he has ever worked with. A comedy legend whose off-screen reputation is one of bitterness and cruelty. 20. John Barrymore. Meet the undisputed king of Hollywood chaos, a legend whose talent was rivaled only by his self-destructive antics. John Barrymore was the crown jewel of the Golden Age, a Shakespearean titan whose magnetic performances in films like Grand Hotel and 20th Century made him a cinematic icon. With his chiseled features, commanding voice, and electrifying stage presence, he was hailed as the greatest actor of his time. But off-screen, he was a walking disaster, a man whose brilliance was drowned in a sea of alcohol and arrogance. It was supposed to be a golden legacy until it wasn't. Barrymore's notorious drinking made him a nightmare on set, often showing up drunk or not at all, slurring lines and clashing with directors who dared to rein him in. His biting wit, while charming in small doses, turned vicious when fueled by liquor, alienating co-stars and crew alike. His personal life was a scandal-soaked mess. 4 tumultuous marriages, countless affairs, and a reputation for outrageous behavior, like reportedly urinating in public or on set to shock his colleagues. By the 1930s, his alcoholism had ravaged his looks and memory, forcing him to rely on cue cards for even the simplest Sinisa heartbreaking fall for a man once called the Great Profile. Barrymore was a tragic genius, a star whose blazing talent was matched only by his unquenchable thirst for self-destruction.